And get started. Welcome to today's mini class. The topic is interface consistency and the case for and against consistency. And so today's session, we're just a quick 30-minute dip into this very important topic. And hopefully I'm going to give you a new angle on it today. It's a little bit of a controversial topic for some people, but hopefully this will give new food for thought or more food for fighting, one of the two. And so let's go ahead and look at the agenda. Consistency, what's it good for? Breaking the tyranny of consistency and measuring consistency and de-risking novel UIs. So where to start? Consistency, what is it good for? And the answer is a lot. The reason why consistency is so highly emphasized in UX is because it's really important. Its purpose is really to facilitate mental model, acknowledgement or recognition. And remember that a mental model is a feeling of expectation met. So it's coming together, your design and the user's expectation. Think about like an electric car charger. Why does it look like a gas or petrol charger? And the reason is because of the fact that people have been using the petrol or the petroleum-based one in the same way for a very, very long time, and it just makes sense, right? And so this is how a lot of design decisions are made. But then we also innovate, and the question is, do we always have to have it look like the gas tank? Real quick again, what is a mental model? So a mental model, if you think of it as expectations or prior knowledge or the feeling of familiarity that a user brings to a design problem, it's really all their past expectations. And consistency helps, again, grease the wheels of the mental model. Think about search. What's your mental model for search? Probably looks something like the top one there, unless you're a librarian or a Boolean search user in a very specialized context, maybe like healthcare or something like that. Like I'm thinking about the NIH, the National Institutes of Health search interface, or some kind of academic or librarian search interface. But normally, generally, your mental model search looks like the top one. And it was not easy getting there. I remember when I first started out in the field and in 2000 designing, 1999, 2000, starting to design for clients, and it hadn't been patterned yet. Google had not created that. The search engine wars were not finished. And so we had clients arguing for the bottom one, and they wanted to expose all the power and the functionality. And we were trying to tell them, like the idiots, the UX, enthusiasts, why it's a good idea. And they just wouldn't listen because their mental model was about unleashing all the power. So the simple truth is that people learn through repetition, through familiarity, and through low surprises. And when I say no huge UI surprises, I'm talking about bad ones, not good ones. There are plenty of great UI surprises. In particular, if you're designing products, physical, tangible products, or designing for VR, AR, it's all about surprise. If you're designing B2B kind of dashboards or those kind of experiences, it's not really too much about surprise other than, wow, this is so easy, or the search is where I need it to be, or it's the right kind of search, or I can get to the other filters easily without forcing me to play with them all, or whatever. So it's small surprises in certain ways, but I'm talking about bad surprise, not good surprise. Good surprise is good, bad surprise, not good, right? And there's a great quote from a recent seminar that was held in Ireland a few weeks ago by the Brain Academy guy. And he had a slide, and it said, I was talking about neuroplasticity, this most important finding in neuroscience, that basically our brains change and grow until you're 100 years old. There's no such thing as aging from a brain perspective. That neuroplasticity, basically what he had on the slide is he said that the more you focus on something and the more you repeat it, then the better you become at it. So the more you focus on it, the more you repeat it, the better you become at it. That could be good or bad, right? And so consistency helps with, forming that, helpful neuroplasticity for the user. There are actually some UX folks that talk about neuroplasticity. So it's an interesting kind of topic. I'm reminded of a small story for years when I was a child, I used to give Christmas presents to my family, and I would put the thing, say it was a small thing, I put it in a very big box. And the reason I did that was because of the anticipation, the mental model of big box must mean big gift. And then they would open it, of course, and it was like, it's kind of a bit of a joke, and then it's, they get the gift, and then that's it. But I still will sometimes do that because I like the fact that it gives that it helps the mental model. So that's fine in that kind of context, that kind of surprise, but not in a UI, because people don't like to learn. They are on autopilot all the time, and that's a good thing. To be that way. So you've probably come across this one before, the okay, cancel, cancel, okay, or cancel or okay, the third variant. I'm gonna drop a poll. I'm gonna drop the question directly on there, or you can go to the Slido if you want, but on the chat, I'm gonna put the poll. And the question is, which okay, cancel combo is correct? A, B, or C, or D, none of the, not plain or none apply. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. If you're watching this later, also make your vote virtually now. Make it count virtually. So what's the correct combo? A, B, C, or D? And so we have a vote, A and C being the two dominant votes here, A and C. It is a little bit of a trick question because okay, cancel is the Windows paradigm. Cancel okay is the Mac paradigm. When I say paradigm, I mean their style guide and their 40 years of UIs have followed this pattern. So that's what I mean by their paradigm. So you got Mac in the middle, PC at the top. And the third one is more like what came out of the .com. It's the sort of Ajax, it's the sort of softer, lighter version. The real answer to this question is none of these are more correct than the other. What do I mean? And what I mean is that, and this has to do with positional memories, where you place things. Should the progressive action be on the left? Should the progressive action be on the right? And it's like the correct, the super correct one, the A student one in human computer interaction history is the Mac one, of course, because they started UX way before Bill Gates was even thinking about it in the late 70s. And the reason is because you're sort of in reading, you go left to right and you sort of end over here, sort of come down the screen, go like this and end over here. But there's nothing wrong with the OK cancel because the PC was up till 10 years ago, the dominant operating system, still is in education and many settings. So there's nothing wrong with Microsoft's OK cancel. In fact, we have to adapt to it because it's become the new consistency, if you will. So it's tricky. This is a nuanced topic. There's no right or wrong answer to this. And I'm going to give you my answer. And this is completely based on my experience being in the field for 25 years. I actually like the last one at the bottom because it emphasizes the primary action, and then the secondary action, it's sort of like is there, but it's like less, so you can think less, you can go straight to the primary action, or you can bail out. So I like the bottom one, but depending on the UI and the context, you could use any of them. If you're designing for PC users and you use the Mac one, you're just showing your bias, for Mac, basically. That's it. Let's go to this. This looks like mobile, but I don't intend it to be mobile. How about this one? I talk about positional memories, like where you place it spatially, right? So OK cancel at the bottom, okay at the bottom, cancel at the top right, cancel top left, and okay top right. Which one is the right one here? Which is the right one here? You know, it looks like mobile, so that's a good reminder that you don't have too many choices to be creative or flexible with mobile because you follow the Android, the iOS style guide, right? And then actually in both iOS and Android these days, the back action is sort of on the top left, which is often the progressive action. It's not necessarily a regressive action. It's the good action, is like back to the previous, you know, thing. Here we have okay cancel. Again, nothing wrong with it per se, but we do know that in regular screens, these things should sort of, you know, you got this thing called button gravity, so people drop to the bottom. But if it's a scrolling screen, you want to repeat it at the top, like in e-commerce, you know, add to cart or checkout or whatever at the top and also at the bottom. Same with navigation at the top, but also in the footer at the bottom, also for accessibility, because the screen reader goes through, reads, and then stop. What do I do now? And so that's why all your top navigation links should be repeated at the bottom of a website for accessibility and also for mobile for the scroll thing. So again, it depends on the context. Is it mobile? Is it not? You know, is it e-commerce? Is the action visible? You know, this middle one is probably the worst one because cancels way up in the top right corner and okay in the bottom. That's just a awkward, you know, sort of placement. That's just not even thinking. Cancel okay might be okay in the top environment here, but this one maybe feels the most comfortable on the left. If we were to summarize this whole topic in UX, it might be avoid inconsistency, right? You've heard it a million times. You've heard it so many times that you should stay consistent, you know, and it's true. It's a good wisdom because consistency is essentially a learning aid, you know, or a learning requirement. Like you need it because people basically don't want to learn. So once they learn it, they don't want to relearn it on your site. They don't want to have to interpret a new set of style guides, generally speaking. And therein lies the nuance of today's mini class, generally speaking. And I will expand on that. So how you interpret consistency is open, is what I'm alluding to. And I'll keep expanding on that, right? Such as the cancel or okay, right? Nothing wrong with that one, even though it's not per the Windows Mac style guide. How you interpret consistency is open, right? And I say that very, very carefully. I say that very lightly. It's a dangerous statement to make because I'm not saying you should just interpret it however you want. I'm just saying it's a reality that different people will interpret it based on their position. The design director that has a graphic design background, the UX director that has an interaction design background, the VP of marketing who you're reporting to, who approves the thing, has a totally different perspective. So everyone's going to interpret. When you start fighting for consistency, you're going to get different interpretations, right? There's a great quote here from Picasso, you know, and the Dalai Lama has one as well, that learn the rules. I like this one. Learn like a pro so you can break them like an artist. That really sums it up with consistency from my experience. This is not the general blah, blah that you get in boot camps and in Medium posts and blog posts. And I really see this with people that are new into the field. They just like pick up the rules and the mantras and they just follow them, like kind of without the experience, without the artistry. The reality, I think it's a reality, you know, and probably I'm saying that because I've worked over 600 different projects in UX. And so I have a lot of experience to compare to. You know, when you're on the Mac, you can add media to an attachment, but not to one that you've locked. Why not? There's an inconsistency. Like my mental model is like, why? I was trying to add a photo to a locked note, and it's like you can't do that. And it was like, well, why not? Or a PDF or some type of attachment. Why not, Apple? And then I just like, okay, and so our rules our rules and policies can cause terrible inconsistency at the UI level. So that's a place to look, especially if you're a service designer, rules and policies. That's one way to deal with GDPR, like do not show this message again. That's very bad, actually. This gets a little bit better because GDPR is all about specifying control of your privacy settings, right? So you can presumably learn more lets you open. This one's even closer, but could be streamlined because there's like a lot going on. It's kind of like, whoa, like overload, especially for neurodiverse users with cognitive disabilities. It's a little overwhelming, it's like deny, allow selection, allow all, and it's sort of like, geez, could you just make it a little easier, please? But the idea of control is better in this GDPR one. I'm talking about in a good case like this, get the magic link. It's the Slack pattern of taking the login burden away from users, because login is a pain in the ass royally, right? Login is just terrible. And the question really that we're asking today is, should all UI actions like buttons, links, password reset patterns, should they look and behave the same to help the user, right? To keep it consistent. I've just argued for consistency, but now I'm sort of opening the crack a little bit in the Picasso sense. And so that's the key. That's the philosophical question. So let's segue then to the second part, which is breaking with the tyranny of consistency. And this is my term, the tyranny of consistency. This term, by the way, came up. A client I was working with, they had about 7 or 8 apps. And because they wanted them to be consistent, they made them all look and lay out everything exactly the same. And one of the product managers said, I don't think we have to do that. And I said to that product manager, I think you're right. This is a tyranny. Like, consistency can be taken too far. Like, you can push consistency because you're fighting for UX for the right thing. You're fighting for the right thing. It's not that you're wrong, but that that you're sort of using it as a way to not differentiate one of those apps in the 7-app family. And so what we did is we changed every app and made them different, because we noticed that users didn't even notice when they were switching apps. It was in the app family, let's say it's like seven modular functionalities that all live together, and then the user switching between one to the other to do various tasks, different web application, B2B. And the users didn't know when they were jumping between the app to app. So this consistency was a tyranny for the users, actually. So if all we did is follow the rules, that wouldn't be too much fun. And you creatives know what I'm talking about. You know who you are. Because it seems like creative folks, they're like, wow, rules? About UX rules? Nah, they're just somebody's opinion. What I mean by that last statement is that a few design directors I know are insulted by the idea of following UX UI rules. They're insulted. They take it as a challenge to change the paradigm and make the button look like an invisible, I don't know, spinning whatever, a slide out, a drawer, I mean, like whatever the thing is, they take it upon themselves to hack the rules that we follow as UX people, when we follow them for a good reason. We're trying to help the user. Right? The laws of UX, a little bit different from the rules. The laws, I think, are maybe a little bit more weight than a rule, right? Picasso didn't go into laws, he just went into rules. What is Jacob's law? Actually, Jacob's law is this: users prefer your site to work the same as other sites they already know. Jacob's law. And this supports consistency. This Jacob Nielsen, of course, a very big proponent of consistency, and all the sort of old-timer UXers, very big proponents of consistency. You'll find, though, with these folks that they don't really value visual design, creativity, and the emotional aspects of user experience. They sort of like, downplay them, and same with Jacob Nielsen. You'll find that as well. So yeah, consistency is important, though. This is my comment that's pretty basic UX. So what else have you got? Your UX goals should be broader. Like, you should follow consistency for sure, But if that's the end of your racetrack, you're missing out on a party. Let's look at the ACM Digital. Whoops, the ACM Digital Library is a it's a database for our community, for all sort of engineering, but also human computer interaction UX falls into it. And it's a great database. I use it, love it all the time. Use it all the time and love it. I mean, if you look at consistency in their 661, so about 400,000 results of 661, right? That's a lot. That's over half have topics covering consistency. It's just a broad search. Another topic, sociability, has 2,000 results roughly out of 661,000. So where's the priority in the UX community, right? So like sociability, like we're social human beings. Like I just like to bring this up also in the sort of to poke at the emperor has no clothes of UX, or the emperor of UX, is to say that what if our priorities had been on sociability from the great voices of UX years ago, the big names that we all follow, like Jacob Nielsen. What if the values there were on sociability? We might have more written about that. It's actually one of the most important things you can do in UX, from what I can tell. It's extremely powerful, underknown, undervalued, underrated, underseen, and underreported on, as you can see here, compared to consistency. All right, so food for thought, right? I'm not saying consistency is bad. I'm saying that you should definitely retain consistency, but go beyond that in terms of UX. A lot of people just think it's about ease of use and consistency being part of that. So how do you measure consistency, and how do you remove the risk from novel UIs? That's the thing there. Novel UIs, I'm talking about those creative directors that I mentioned, design directors, that think that consistency is something they should tear apart. One of the most important ways to evaluate consistency is through user testing. That's the most important way. But in particular, summative user testing, that's the one where you gather metrics so you can measure, count the number of confusions, number of errors, success rate, maybe even time on task, if it's relevant. And you can also use this in combination with A/B testing. So by the way, we're talking about 15 users here for summative user testing, 15 users, not 5, 15. And you can combine that with A/B testing to build a super case. You can bring data from A/B testing with summative data from a 15 user test. And there you can see whether your users are mentally mapping, whether they're, spatially, hitting the targets where they should, and whether there are problems with your buttons, your links, your UI paradigms that you're using, such as entering a payment, such as updating, editing, deleting, resetting your password, onboarding, and on, right? The second way that seems logical is a heuristic evaluation. However, I'm going to scratch that one from our list. It's an update from what I used to believe, I say used to, maybe about 10, 15 years ago. And one of the reasons is that research has shown that heuristic evaluations find between 30 and 50% of problems, and found compared to a usability test. And the other reason why I scratch it is they're less believable, and also, like I mentioned, consistency can be interpreted. Also, the other thing you should know about heuristic eval, it's supposed to be done by, theoretically, it's supposed to be done by a group, like 3 or 4 evaluators, not just one. And it's very rare to have 3 or 4 evaluators evaluating the heuristic eval in a real business use of heuristic eval. It's usually one UX person or a team, but usually done by 1 or maybe 2 UX people. So, no big deal. It's okay. It's a slightly flawed technique. You don't hear too much criticism about it, and you certainly don't get that research because Jacob Nielsen built his career off of that technique, and he's not going to tell you all the flaws about the thing that he, his heuristics, Jacob's heuristics, and he loves that authority that he gets from them. So we just don't get the criticism. But heuristic evaluation, the reason I used to believe it was good is because as you go along, and I still would recommend that as you go along, you apply Jacob's heuristics and that you do a heuristic evaluation. By the way, there are 3 or 4 different rules from research, peer-reviewed researchers, not just Jacob Nielsen's, that you should know about. Also something that's not widely talked about, but it's important to know about them because then you can get like a more rounded picture and not just Jacob's, 1992 heuristics. Also, the other thing to do to calm your wild UIs, your novel UIs, is use what's standard. So UI style guides is what I'm talking about, especially, for example, with mobile apps in particular, because you don't really want to get inventive, as I pointed out earlier. Also, if you're copying from another, not just another company, like, and when I say another company, I'm talking about Apple or Google, or I don't know, like whoever's in your industry, you see them doing it so that you want to do it too. Test with users, absolutely critical to make sure that it transferred over to your domain and even to your brand. If you're within an industry, even to make sure it transferred to your brand. The key thing is don't reinvent page location or buttons, for example, spatial positioning, where things go. Don't reinvent those. I'll give you an example. Here's an example from a project I'm working on, actually. So this designer is not really a UX person, is more of a developer, is kind of a well-rounded, the person that decided to do this, and they put, this is a social network. This person put all the navigation controls at the bottom of the browser. Not only that, but this navigation thing opens up and slides open and everything disappears, and then it brings up a second, like a deeper level of tasks. And it's even hard to see. I don't know if you can even notice that the back and next buttons are so far apart. And then there's this sort of, black and whitish looking thing. It's just, I didn't even see it actually the first time I looked at the site. I think it was the second time or third time, maybe even that I saw it. So there's a reason why you don't see navigation on the bottom of apps, on the bottom of sites, on the bottom of, when I say apps, I mean web applications, on bottom of sites. You do see them on mobile, so no problem there, but this is not mobile. This is the web, and it's not a mobile app. That's a paradigm from a mobile app. That's the only place you see it, or unless you're a Mac user, you're used to having icons down there. But it just doesn't work on the web. So this is an example of spatial position, bad example. So the tip here is only tinker with UI controls that can verifiably make your user's life easy. Verifiably meaning user testing at the micro task level. Try and tinker with, try and innovate at that when, they're completing tasks at that. And instead of like a bigger, for example, those like navigation, where are you going to put it? Oh, at the bottom. Why are you putting it at the bottom? Oh, because I'm used to that, because I stay on my phone all the time. I use mobile apps. Well, that's not the web. You can't transfer that familiarity, your familiarity as a designer, over to your users. This is an example of a novel UI that we use at Experience Dynamics, and it's a pie menu. It's a radio menu. This is a wireframe, so it's kind of rough here, but we tested, and it tested really well. It tested really well in many banks' financial services application. We had one person who wasn't a user, was a boss of a user, who said, "Oh, my trader's never going to use that," and it was like, well, let's get that person to use it and see. And like everyone else used it fluidly, didn't say anything about it, didn't comment, like it, hate it, done. They just used it. They just got the task done. And to me, it's the first time that a pie menu has been used in a financial services web application. Well, to the credit of Jeff Raskin's son, Asha Raskin, who works at the Center for Humane Technology now, he had created, right around the time his dad died, he had created something called Songza, which was a playlist type of, you could build a musical play, songs playlist. and he was using a pie menu because he knew what it was. His dad was a UX pioneer. It's one of the first, brought usability testing to Apple in 1978. Jeff Raskin. And so I was like, oh, this might work here. And then it was like, oh, this is too novel. We tested it. It worked really well. It actually became a differentiator for our client. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. Like if we had gone with the traditional boring, like standard UIs, we probably wouldn't have tried that pie menu. Wouldn't even have made it to the wireframe stage. It's another good example from Basecamp. You know, you've got the radio buttons. This is the click on the middle one, and it opens the subtask there, the sort of inline magical control behaviors with JavaScript or Ajax. So that's an example. That's a non-standard UI. Google had another great one where you would delete a playlist, I think, and the button, when you hit delete, it would change. The button would change inline right there in that space and say, "Are you sure you want to delete?" And then yes, delete, and then cancel. And then when you hit delete, it would say, okay, and then give you a confirmation. So it had this little routine of, and I think they still use it, but I'm having trouble finding the actual UI. That was completely novel when Google did that. And Google does that a lot. They'll sort of invent stuff, but it's grounded in use. So it's non-standard, it's inconsistent, but it works well, tests well, uses well. And so that's the reason why you can explore breaking consistency, but only very carefully and validated, right? If you're inventing a whole new interaction paradigm, that's fine, but, so that's my mantra on this topic. That's fine, but, right? And you can guess what the but is. Let's user test it. There's Jeff Raskin, hat tip again too. He invented this drag and drop actually, but unfortunately, this is really difficult for non-technical users. It's actually a Mac thing. It's again an Apple bias. And in the PC world, Microsoft created a puzzle game that in the very first edition of Windows, it was basically blackjack, and it was like they had these free little games. And what they were doing is they were trying to build consistency and familiarity with drag and drop. Elderly users, non-technical users, I've noticed, struggle with drag and drop, and also it's not accessible. You can't drag and drop very easily if you're blind. Oops. So that's the but, right? Here's another one from HoloLens 1, the bloom gesture. This is like a tap and then bloom, and bloom opens a menu. And I remember when the HoloLens first came out, I was like, oh, how cool is this? And I was actually also designing some interactions for mixed reality that were for the first time. And it was so exciting and so dangerous because you can't just assume that because you invented and you figured it out, like the bloom, it's going to work. The bloom you got tired after a while. So it's fine for demos, but they killed the bloom. They don't have it on HoloLens 2 anymore. They got rid of it. Here's some good examples of novel UIs that support this is a concept where you pull back on mobile, and then the Palm Pre, which no longer exists, obviously, it's like mid 2000s. But right before it died, actually, they had this quick launch bar, and it was kind of a contextual menu. Let me remind you, though, that this doesn't always, supporting the task level doesn't always work. Apple, for example, on their phones in the last 5 years or so, you push down to get the task, and it opens a menu on the app, so you can do subtask right by pushing down on your iPhone icon. Nobody uses it. It's totally useless. It was a great idea, but it didn't play out in longer term use. So be careful. And that concludes our topic. I guess be careful being the final words with that. But let's see. Any questions here before we wrap up today? Comments, thoughts, questions on consistency?
No, I'm still kind of thinking about it. This was a good review, indeed.
Okay, great. Good to hear it. There's a lot to think about. A lot of people fight about consistency. A lot of people a lot of UX people get really bullheaded about it. You get really strongly opinioned about how important it is, and it becomes like a way to project power, instead of actually like using it to help users and lower the risk of crazy UIs or too creative UIs. But you can push the envelope, and you should push the envelope, because if you don't, it's just going to be boring. That we're just, and particularly if you're in the immersive reality space with augmented or virtual reality, it's fun to break the rules, but it's also dangerous, and so that's why user testing very important, and in particular summative or metrics-based user testing, to really get the grounding and the data so that you can build a case, and also so you can defend your new design and say, actually, yeah, this works. Now, would people want to use it? That's a whole other, like the Apple press down thing, whole other story. Yeah, my friend and client said he loved the tyranny of consistency thing, because everyone at the company was saying, no, everything has to be consistent, and I said to him, no, that's what we call the tyranny of consistency. And he said, oh, I love that. I'm gonna write that down and use that one, because it challenged he liked it because it challenged the conventional thinking about UX, so I think with UX, if you have no fear, you can tackle these difficult topics and subjects, and and innovate like that. Thank you so much. I think that's all we have time for today. See you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.